Well, hello and welcome to another week on the allotment. And it's fair to say work is slowing up now. Obviously, you know, winter, I'm sure everybody with allotments is the same. And actually, I mean, it's the weekend, it's Sunday, and Barry and Margaret have been up here, but that's it. Nobody else is up here. And actually that's probably the right decision, because you can't walk anywhere. Everywhere you walk you make a mess. And you know, most people are seasonal. They don't carry on through the winter. Barry's making an awful lot of effort on his compost bins. And they're very lucky, although they're on the lower stretch or strip of allotments, they're quite dry. I've always sort of thought that because we were the higher series of plots, that we were the drier ones. Actually, it turns out it's not the case, that all these ones on this higher plot, and I don't pretend to understand why. Maybe we've got a clay seam just under the surface that, you know, keeps the water table right high. But I've been over on Barry's plot this morning talking to him and Margaret, and their plot's perfectly fine to walk about on. It's wet, but Margaret's been digging today. You know, I can't even dream about that. But anyway, that's the situation up here. But I've come up here really, one, because I love being up here, and two, because there's still stuff to pick. And that brings me on to a couple of points I'd like to make about questions or comments I've had from subscribers, which I'm always thrilled to get. I love the interactiveness of YouTube. And the first one, I think that was from Frank, who I tend to remember because he's an ex-serviceman like me. But he mentioned about, you know, you've got to make these raised beds. And I totally agree. Now, I think he said these are a foot high, done with scaffold planks. Well, you know, that would be fantastic. My only reservation about that is that I simply couldn't fill them. You know, where do I get the material from? Now, we've got some chippings, but they're not endless. And we use them for the paths mostly. So what I've thought of, and it all comes down to money. I'm just not prepared to spend a lot of money on my allotment. I'd like, if I could wave a magic wand and money wasn't an issue, I'd buy decking. And you know, a plank of decking is about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches wide, and I would make all the edges of my individual beds that deep, and that would bring the soil up 4 or 5 inches above the level of the ground, and I think that would be sufficient. And so I think about the allotment a lot, and it passes my time when I'm working. And I thought, well, maybe, you know, I could do a couple of beds a year, just as the wood rots that's already around them, just replace. So I'm only spending £10 or £20 per, well, if it'd be a bit more than that, per bed, and just do it on a trickle basis. So yeah, I totally agree with that comment, and it would make a big difference. But of course, I have to bear in mind while I'm here in the winter, it's only a winter issue. During the summer, I spend all my time ferrying water to and fro, watering all the crops. And I think that is one of the things that they've told us, the scientists have said about climate change, is that you're going to get the extremes. So we are now, in the last 2 years certainly, we've had extended periods of dry, hot weather. And then we get extended periods like we are now, where it does nothing but rain all the time. And and of course now we've got, there's flooding all over the UK, albeit thankfully I think most of it has subsided. But of course it doesn't take much, another hard day's rain and the flooding will come back, because there's nowhere for the water to go. Mostly because we keep building on this, floodplains where the water is meant to go. Nature's far more intelligent than we are, and nature invented floodplains, and then we invented housing properties or developments, and we build there, and then everyone who moves in these houses says, hey, my house is flooded, what are you all going to do about it? So yeah, it's a winter problem, and maybe I should just do what everyone else does, go home and do something else. So that was the first thing. And the other thing was somebody, and I'm sorry I can't remember who it was, had a stroke of genius. It's blindingly obvious, as most things are that are clever. You don't need to lose your leeks. Why don't you freeze them? Well, actually, I'm now running a program of every time I come here, I pull out about half a dozen leeks, take them home, prepare them, and then Cheryl chops them up and bags them and puts them in the freezer. And I do it that way because we don't have the freezer space, but every week we take stuff out the freezer and use it. Therefore, as that comes out, more can go in. So yeah, we've started, and I've got half a dozen there now, which I'll show you in a moment. And we're running a program of freezing our leeks. And I picked, I think it was about 8 this morning, and 2 of them were rotten through, right the way through. They were mush. I could actually open them up with my fingers. But that's 8, and 6 of them are okay. So, that's a very acceptable ratio. I'm not sure how long it'll stay that way. It'll, obviously more and more will rot as the ground stays waterlogged. But thank you for that tip. I don't know, I don't know why I didn't think of it, but I didn't. And I'm now doing that. So that's been very helpful. And then I've spent most of the day, it's only about 2 o'clock, it's just gone 2. And Barry and Margaret have just left. And I've been putting down more cardboard and more mulch and picking some crops. And I'll give you a little quick whiz around the plot in a minute and show you what it's looking like at the moment. So I think without any further ado, let's have a look at the leeks and the parsnips I picked, which are very ugly looking, and a look at the plot. Well, it's messy, but it's perfectly fine. So that'll be going in the freezer tonight. So there are the leeks I've picked today. Very happy with those, nothing wrong with them. They'll need a bit of washing because there's a bit of soil and so on mixed in, but other than that, perfectly fine, and they'll be in the freezer tonight. Finally picking some red cabbage. They're not the biggest in the world, but there's only 2 of us, and that will make enough coleslaw for a week. So very happy with that. But that is one of my parsnips. Hideously ugly looking thing, although I love parsnip. quite why it splits like that. I mean, I know all the generally accepted things. Your soil's too rich, don't compost it. And the bed that they grew in wasn't composted last year. And, you know, it would be, if I could pull them out the ground and they were perfectly parsnip looking, as you'd expect them, cylindrical like a carrot, I'd be over the moon. But it's not. But it's still edible. And this goes back to what I've mentioned on previous videos about your expectations. It's not like they look in the supermarket, but then would you really want to eat a parsnip out of the supermarket? Because, you know, the way they grow them like that is completely artificial, and they're covered in herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. So, okay, that's going to cause me a little bit of extra work, but there's nothing on that except mud. It's just splattered on my face, and you know, there's nothing wrong with mud. It washes off. So, you know, with a knife and a bit of patience, I can make that into a series of parsnip-looking shapes, and we'll roast them. They're one of the only things we roast now, just simply because I love them roasted, and I know that destroys almost all goodness, but you know, sometimes it's just nice to have something that tastes good. So yeah, that's the parsnip, and there's 3 of those, and they're going home with me. Yeah, if anyone can suggest how I can just grow straight parsnips, I'd be interested. I did see something by Charles Dowding, and he says all this stuff about, you know, composting and so on, because of course he puts compost on the top of his beds every year like I'm doing, and then grows straight through them. And he says one of the reasons his carrots and parsnips and root vegetables are so perfectly pointed, as they should be, is because they're having to force through ground that isn't dug. And the only way to get through something sharp is with a pointed end, and that's what creates his very nice looking carrots and parsnips. So the fact that I'm going no dig this year, next year, I'm just going to hope that next year it's a bit different, and then they're not growing like that. These parsnips, I created a hole with a big large dibber, and I filled it with compost, proprietary bought compost, to create a growing tunnel, if you like, down, hoping that the roots would go down through the so clearly that doesn't work. Maybe that's what happened. The compost has caused it to split. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I know I'm going to try something different next year. And again, that's the beauty of allotments, is that there's always that optimism that it'll be different next year, even if it isn't. Anyway, let's have a quick look at the plot. Well, starting down at the bottom end on this piece of extra land, I've just about finished the process of laying the cardboard, and I've left the 3 roots of those rhubarb plants exposed. I did some apple tree or some fruit tree pruning recently, and those are the chippings resulting. So I've covered the cardboard with those chippings, and hopefully that will break down. And this is where I'm going to grow my pumpkins and squashes next year. These leeks are okay actually. The ground is waterlogged, you can see that here. And of course these ones sitting in the water will now have rotted, but some of them, like those over there, should still be okay. This area where I grew my potatoes is all mulched, and all I've got to do now is move into where those blackberries are growing and try and remove the nettles, and then put more cardboard in so that next year the nettles don't prevent me from getting in to pick the blackberries. So that's an ongoing job. That's still a bag of unusable potatoes that got to go on the bonfire. And so this path again has been completely relaid with more chippings, doubling the thickness because it just became waterlogged again. And you can see from walking through here and then up onto the main path, it has made a difference. I am glad I did it. However, I do still have standing water, and I can't step off onto the grass paths really, because as you can see, I would just ruin the whole thing. However, very happy with the progress. Not much I can do about the water, but like I've said before, I feel that I'm ahead of the game and everything is now ready for next year. We're having our celeriac and potato mash tonight, so I will tell you how that goes. The other beds have either got garlic or onions in them, or they're mulched, cardboarded, etc. The leeks are becoming fewer and further between because I'm digging them up. Got to cut all these raspberry canes down. I'll do that another time, but I'm hoping to get that done before we have the bonfire. And the only reason we haven't had the bonfire yet is because everything's so wet. And there's one of the last two beds to be cardboarded and mulched. I've just opened up one of my compost heaps, and that's my own made compost going on the cardboard. And I shall hopefully finish that when I've finished the video. But yeah, everything else is very, very dormant, and the shed is an absolute joy. Having that fire on when I get here. I know I spend far too much time in there, but you know, it's what I like to do. Well, that's a short video this week, and of course, you know, as we get into winter proper soon, there'll be less and less to show. So what I'll probably do is, instead of doing a weekly video, I'll drop to fortnightly, or depending on how it goes, maybe monthly. So but you know, by February we'll be coming through spring, and I can go back up to the weekly uploads. So I hope you bear with that. I'm sure everybody else is doing the same. So thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Thanks for all the comments that I get. I read every one of them and I reply to them all, hopefully. I do appreciate it. So thanks for watching, and I won't be around next weekend. We're away in the caravan, we're going to Exmoor, but I'll be back in a fortnight. So I shall see you then. Take care, bye for now.